Want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for continuing to support my channel. And I am done. Okay, so I just finished up reading Tress of the Emerald Sea. This is the first secret project by Brandon Sanderson, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing the book, which was just right now. So I love this book. This is awesome. I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5, kind of reluctantly a 5 out of 5. Not like the top tier of it, more like on the bottom of my 5 out of 5s, but it's really, really good. I loved basically everything about it after about the 20% mark of this book. If you're not familiar with what I mean by secret project, then you probably aren't into fantasy, because Brandon Sanderson a while back decided he was going to release 4 secret books. And it turned into the biggest Kickstarter of all time. I don't remember how much money it was, but it was like well over $20 million, maybe like over 30 million. And I got the ebooks. That's what I prefer to read in, and I don't know anything about these books. I haven't read a single thing about any of these, and so I went in totally blind. But I was a little reluctant, I gotta say, and I got more reluctant as time went on after I bought them, in part because, you know, I did not like the last Mistborn book at all. And I really worried that this was a trend that Brandon Sanderson was going to go on, about writing things that are way too involved in the 𝐒𝐻𝐤𝐽. Now, I like the 𝐒𝐻𝐤𝐽, but the Lost Metal was just too much for me. And I've heard that the gloves are off, I think is the quote that everybody keeps saying that Brandon Sanderson said, that he's now going to go all in on the 𝐒𝐻𝐤𝐽 and make this, you know, the Marvel of fantasy books. But that's not what this was. This had 𝐒𝐻𝐤𝐽 connections, very clear 𝐒𝐻𝐤𝐽 connections, but it was enough so that you could read this book without knowing anything about the 𝐒𝐻𝐤𝐽 and still get enjoyment out of it. And that's what I think Brandon Sanderson should do going forward. You know, I love this aspect of the 𝐒𝐻𝐤𝐽 being Easter eggs and fun things for people that have read all the books, but that anybody should be able to pick up these books and enjoy it. And yeah, Tress of the Emerald Sea is exactly that. I also worried about this because I've never been a huge fan of these standalone Sanderson books. I've never given one a 5 out of 5. So by definition, I think this is the best standalone Sanderson book that I've ever read. And I don't think that. That is what I feel. And so yeah, I thought I was going to give this like a 3 out of 5. And as I was reading this book, I was almost feeling like a 3 out of 5 was going to be, you know, optimistic, because I really disliked the first, you know, I'd say 20%. There were so many things that I disliked about it. You know, this book is written from, I don't want to spoil anything for people that like it like me, but this book has kind of a framing narrative on it where it's a story being told to somebody else. I don't want to tell you who's telling the story, but that's what it is. And I didn't love the voice of the person telling the story. And what I mean by voice is their writing, the style of the way that they talk. And it was too comedic. I have made a lot of references that I don't think Brandon Sanderson's humor is as witty as he thinks it is. And it can come off, like, in my mind, like he's trying to write like Terry Pratchett, but that he doesn't have the skills of a Terry Pratchett. Now, there's tons of things that I think Brandon Sanderson does that are on the top of the fantasy game. His worlds, his magic systems, his twists, his plots. But, you know, his comedy, no. And this book started out very comedy heavy, and I rolled my eyes. I never laughed once. I take that back. I did get a couple little chuckles, but not at the beginning of the book, as it went along a little bit. But not enough to justify how much was being used. I also didn't love the YA nature of this book. You know, I haven't looked, but I'm assuming that this book is classified as a YA story. And I don't like a lot of YA stuff. Now, some I do. But I can't remember the last time that I've given a 5 out of 5 to a YA story. And it was really heavy in the beginning of this book. And the plot wasn't really going anywhere. And the magic systems weren't, it was evident what the special thing about the magic was here, but it wasn't being utilized correctly. Now, as soon as the plot picks up, it just rocks from that point forward. The tone of the comedy tones down because it's a lot more about interactions between different characters than it is as like an internal voice kind of thing. And it becomes a wonderful kind of growing of age story of this woman, a young adult named Tress. And she has a classic plot of trying to rescue her future spouse. Usually those genders are flipped, but it's rescuing your love. And it sounds hokey. It really works. Now, part of what works for me, and I am a sucker for this, I try to take bias out, but most of the books takes place on sea, on a boat. And I don't know what it is, but I love fantasy books that take place on sea. And I loved everything about the story that went on from that point forward. It really, really worked. The world is magical for a book that is not very long. I don't know the page length here because I was reading on ebook, and ebooks, unless you buy them directly from Amazon, they usually don't tell you the book numbers. It'll be like a location number. So I don't know, but I'm guessing this book's probably in like the 400 page mark, and that's not a lot of pages to build a wonderful world. I find that, the best worlds in fantasy are those that have not just a single book that is very long, but many long books to kind of build this up. But the world is magical, and I use that not in the there is magic in it sense, although there is. I use it in it's captivating. It fills you with wonder, and it's very beautifully done. And I will remember this world and the things that make this world special for a very long time. I don't know that I will ever forget them because it's unique and it works, and it's got this really bright tone to it that's kind of like this positive, fun vibe to it that really, really works. Now, I want to move over to the fantasy elements because I think the fantasy elements combine into what makes this world special. And I've worried for a while that somebody like a Sanderson who thrives on making unique magic systems eventually will run out of cool things to do. It hasn't happened yet because I've never read anything like the unique nature of what the magic was here. I'm going to try my best to explain it because maybe I don't understand it perfectly, but instead of water on a sea, what people are sailing these ships on is spores, magical spores. Now there's these different seas, and they each have their own spore. Now imagine the spores, I think, as like little balls that have different shapes to them. And you can sail on them just like water, but the difference is that when water hits them, they react in a certain way. A spore in one sea will make enormous vines that will just totally go out of control and can wrap up people, wrap up ships, and not allow them to move. Some on others will create these horrific beasts that pop up out of the ocean and attack you. Some of them create, these huge, red, death, like these red, icicles that will attack, and essentially you get touched by that and you're done. And it's very fun. This totally different take on water and spinning what we know about classic seafaring adventures, and this really very interesting thing that gets investigated in a lot of different ways. And so they go to all these different seas, they interact in different ways, and they have to be careful in different ways. I just love it. Now, the characters I think are awesome. Tress, the main character, is wonderful. I always love a character who gets a lot of character growth in these stories, and Tress is the definition of that. The Tress that starts off this book is very different, although similar, but different in a well-developed way over time, and it's nice. I think all of the characters, a lot of the characters here are shipmates of Tress, and they all kind of have a thing that defines them that is holding them back. And I want to say almost all of them that get names are able to find a way to better themselves. And maybe not by just achieving what they set out to achieve, but combating that or getting over it and becoming better people. And I liked that immensely. The writing quality is not great. And that's my only criticism of this book. Now, it's not so bad that it took me out of the story, although it did at the beginning. But this constant use of jokes that don't work for me, I didn't love. Sanderson writes even though this is YA story, all of his books lack, creative prose. Now, I don't need amazing prose to make a story great. It can elevate a story. It can take a good story like Rome of the Ugglings and make it, one of the best things that I've ever read. But here it's held back, and it's just the way Sanderson writes. And I suspect that if he felt like it, that he probably has it in him to write at a much stronger level. But I think he's found his niche. I think he's found what works, what sells, what people enjoy. And this is it. And I still enjoy, I thoroughly enjoy his books, but that is the part that I think holds back a lot of Sanderson books from being, the best ever. Now, the final criteria that I always like to talk about is my enjoyment. And this is by far the most important criteria. And it almost always matches up with the score that I give to the book. And in this case, it's true. My enjoyment was a 5 out of 5. I think everybody would enjoy this book. Well, maybe not everybody. I will say that the kind of person that will enjoy this book likes an adventure story, likes to have fun, likes a growing of age story, and, likes I've heard this many times and I find it very apt, but the Princess Bride kind of feel to a story, that's what this is. This is exactly what this is, and it nails that perfectly. Now, the people that might dislike this book are those that kind of exclusively like more adult, very serious adult content, because you're not going to get that here. Now, I am one of those people. I don't exclusively like it, but that's what I prefer, and even I still liked it. So I suspect the vast, vast majority of people that read this book are going to enjoy their experience. You just kind of got to get through, quite a few chapters here to get really moving in the story, and then it doesn't really let up from there. I will also say, and I didn't have a category here to throw this in, but there's a wonderful twist here, a classic Sanderson twist. And he's the best at this, I find, in all of fantasy, because his twists always are things that you should have been able to figure out earlier on. And he does them in such a clever way that I almost never catch on to them. So when they happen, I always have the same feeling of, oh man, I should have seen that coming, but I didn't. That's the feeling that I like. It's the same kind of feeling in like a detective story where, a very good detective movie, when they reveal who the killer is or something like that, you could have pieced it out. You should have pieced it out by that point, but you didn't. The clues were there for the taking. And the bad ones are those that kind of randomly just throw it out at you, where there's no way you would have been able to figure out. Sanderson is in that former camp, and I love him for it. So pick up these books. I don't know if you can get them right now, if you did not get on the Kickstarter, but they will become available soon. Pick up Tress of the Emerald Sea. I almost guarantee that at the very least, you're going to have a fun time. So, thank you so much for watching this review, and as always, happy reading to you. I want to give a special shout out to my Ascendant tier patrons, Sky, Russell, Ron Reich, and Romeo Mike.